All right, guys, we're going to get going today. I'd like to welcome everybody on the call. We're here for our webinar, Ex-Target Buyer Speaks, Storytelling and Data. I'm going to jump straight into the introductions. My name's Christopher DeGrazia. I hail from the land down under, hence my accent. I'm not going to be speaking too much today. Phil's going to take most of the floor, so if you can't understand me, I do apologize. I am a marketing manager here at Askuity and host of popular retail podcast, Retail Ramblings. Got the pleasure, the absolute pleasure of having Phil Chang from Retail Phil with me today. Phil comes with an absolute wealth of knowledge. I'm honestly not exaggerating when I say that this is one of the best guests that we've ever had the pleasure of having on one of our webinars or the podcast, which I do myself as well. Phil comes with 20 years of experience as a buyer. He's been a sales strategist. He's an all-round sales guy, very dialed into current retail issues in the next generation of commerce. Phil's a frequent speaker at industry events in both Canada and the United States, speaks across multiple different verticals. He's a Retail Wire Brain Trust panelist. He's been quoted in Forbes. He's a featured writer in trade publications such as Retail Touchpoints, Total Retail, Pet Product News, Black Biz, and more. Currently specializes in helping brands and retailers fix their pain points and optimize their business in many ways. And we'll kind of be touching on some of those today with our 3Ms. But Phil, I'm going to let you take the floor. How was the introduction?
That was amazing. You're hired. I wish you could just, maybe I can hire you to go with me play the intro. I'm really excited to be here. I think this is a great conversation to have. Chris doesn't do himself justice. He's a super knowledgeable guy, and you'll see that through the conversation today. But
Thanks,
we're very excited. I think this is going to be a great conversation.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. Before we do jump into too much of the content, because there is going to be a lot of content today, I'm going to put a poll out there. I kind of want to see, we're obviously going to be very buyer focused in this conversation today, how often people are meeting with their buyers on average. That should pop up pretty much immediately for everybody out in the audience. Phil, I'm curious, how often were you meeting with your best vendors and maybe your worst vendors as well?
Yeah, it really depends. So I would find that kind of in my top 100 or so, if I had top buyers, they're kind of showing up. I would get them in once a week. And then if you're lower in my tiers, then, once every couple of weeks. And then if you're in my bottom half, it'd be once a month.
Yeah, it's funny. We're actually kind of seeing the vast majority of the results coming quarterly, but I guess it's very category driven as well, isn't it?
It's very, if you're seasonal and you're not in season, there's probably no reason to meet with a buyer.
Definitely.
So yeah.
No, that's really good. There's some really good insight. Just for everybody out in the audience, quarterly is what we're getting the majority of our responses coming from. Okay. There's some for monthly, and there's also some people who it looks like are here on the call just for educational reasons, and they don't take part in buyer meetings at all, which is really good to see too. Yeah. So we'll jump into the content here. Phil, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah. So one of the kind of overlying messages is in today's retail world, buyers are really short on time and they're short on bandwidth. And so what we've tried to do today is get you, a way of getting buyers educated, engaged, and then impressed with your ability to tell stories backed by data. Obviously, the Askuity folks have a ton of data that you can use, and I was super excited to see that. I think that's going to be how you get to be super effective at your retailer.
Definitely.
Okay, so we've organized this into 3 buckets. And so the first one is method. This is the bare minimum you need to cover with your buyer to make sure you won't be a failure, that you don't get kicked out of a meeting, that the buyer doesn't think you're crazy. You need to be able to do this to be able to clear everyday business. And then if you can do that properly, you can get to what we call magic, which is the ability to take insights and really create value added initiatives for the buyer that gets them really excited. And then once you get them there, you can get to madness, which is really about surprising and delighting the buyer. It's about entering the trust circles the buyer has, and then being able to inspire the buyer to do bigger things that obviously you and your company will be able to capitalize on. Okay, so we're going to hit method. Method is really, so before we hit method, actually, one of the things you want to think about is a buyer's mindset. We saw in the poll that you're either a quarterly, monthly, some of you are weekly, some of you are biweekly, but you spend a lot of time getting prepped for a really important meeting with a buyer. So you spend a lot of time thinking about your numbers, going through that stuff. The thing that you got to remember is when you get your buyer hasn't spent a quarter thinking about you. Your buyer hasn't spent, it's no offense, you shouldn't take offense to it. They're not thinking about you at all until you show up at their doorstep. Yeah. And the reason for that is because they're really only a buyer for part of the time. You got to think of a buyer like a general manager who runs a section of the store. And they're really they're thinking about a lot of things. They're thinking about stores, they're thinking about marketing, they're thinking about operations. At any given time, a buyer will get yelled at by their store for all sorts of things that they may or may not have responsibility for. So they're thinking about all those things. They're thinking about the consumers who shop the store, how do they bring them back, how do they get them to buy more, and then they're thinking about the competition, who's beating them in the marketplace. And then last on that list, which you probably hear the most about is, am I making enough money? Am I going to get in crap from my DMM? Is there a way I can make more money? How do I make more profit? So you just need to make sure that you're in the right mindset and know that they're thinking about all these things before you get to them.
Definitely. And it speaks to a lot of the content and a lot of the research that we've done here at Askuity. And I hope that people in the audience have kind of seen that content in the past, but a lot of it is trying to help and enable vendors to get inside the mind of their buyer. I know our 10 Things Your Buyer Hates About You series, and I'm going to give it a cheeky little plug here. And if anybody hasn't read it in the audience, it's a really great follow-up to this particular webinar that we're hosting today. But a lot of the research that we did there was an effort to try and get inside that buyer, a buyer's mind. And there's one quote or one story, I think it's from the first ebook that we published, that really stands out to me. And it's very much about buyers don't want vendors to have self-serving interests, right? Yeah. It's about a partnership. And there was a particular quote from a buyer that went, as a vendor, your credibility is everything. So don't give your buyer any reason to doubt your commitment to a true partnership. And that's the crux of it, right, Phil?
Absolutely.
At the very core of it, it's about building a partnership. And from that partnership, you're able to get in and understand your buyer better.
Yeah. Can't be more true. Okay, so we had all sorts of ways to cover the method. I had a kind of a great big list, but Chris did a really great job of organizing this for you. So pretty amazing. So the way you read this is Chris has kind of helped me bucket this into 4 great big buckets. So money, logistics, money, operations, logistics, and great products. And then what you'll see down below is key data. And these are the key fields that you need to be able to clear to answer these questions. So if you're kind of working off a checklist, that kind of key buckets at the bottom is what the checklist is going to be. So as I go through these, I'm going to cover these fairly quickly. I'll go through the key questions. But if you're thinking about, as you cover money, when you prep for this presentation, you've kind of got the style, you've rehearsed it, you've almost got a script or what you want to say in your head. As soon as you start talking, the buyer is going to be looking at the product. So you're going to put the product on the table and go, boy, do I have a great story for you. The buyer is immediately going to start thinking about this. So they may or may not hear everything you have to say, right? Because they're already thinking about it. They're going to be thinking like, what does it cost? What does it retail for? What's the impact on my cash flow? How quickly does it turn? And what's the order time? The one in there that you should want to think about that kind of carries its way all the way through these is things like open to buy or cash flow. Yeah. It's not something that a normal sales team would think about. If you think about this from a, we're coming up to May, patio season, barbecue season is starting. If you have an outdoor buyer, they made a bet on their business 9 months ago on these products. So everything that's hitting the shelf right now, they bought and paid for last September or somewhere in there. And so right now, if you were to show up and you had patio furniture, or you want something, what you might think is a small incremental purchase that the buyer could make to augment their assortment, to the buyer, they might be tapped out on cash until they actually sell some of this stuff. And so those are some of the things that you want to kind of get in your headspace and think about, because the buyer might actually be really worried about cash. They're just not going to tell you. So you kind of need to structure your questions based on the reactions they have. We move into operations. If you get past the money discussion and they really, they're intrigued by the product, you'll find this, because the buyer will immediately jump into like, where do I put it? How many facings? Like, what do I take out? The what do I take out question is one that you can help a buyer with, right? Because in my world before, when I was a buyer, I had big guys like Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, folks like that in my category. And so when a little guy would come and say, hey, you can just take out that one Procter & Gamble product and put in mine, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, yes, okay, great volumes, it makes sense. but I'm also dreading the conversation I got to have with Procter & Gamble.
Is that just from a personal level, like as a
Yeah.
buyer, as a human being, to have that conversation is difficult?
It's not so much like the math is usually there, right? Because the math will be like, hey, you know what? Like this product from Procter & Gamble might sell $1 million a year.
Yeah.
I'm showing you a product that's going to sell you 2 million, and the profits are better. So great. The math conversation is great. The problem is like big organizations or tier 1 companies will bring like 8 people with them. So I got to talk to 8 people about it. This is where you see a buyer get really mean and nasty, because the buyer will, that's when I'll go to my salesperson and go, listen, I got to talk to you. This is in, this is out. I don't want you to bring 8 people. Like you'll get a chance because you're a partner, but this is the way it's got to be. So sometimes you'll get, that's where those buyers get that kind of like reputation of being mean and nasty.
Yeah.
Because you got to be that to kind of like cut and dry things, right? So think about those things. You got to cover these. You got to think about all the operations questions that a buyer is going to go through. They're also going to be thinking about logistics, right? So how many cases are inners? You're going to hear this a lot, right? Because buyers will always want inners because it costs them less. So their open to buy budget isn't impacted as much. They can order it more often. It's less heavy on their spend. And then once you get past all of those things, you can get into great products, right? Like you can be a fan here is, why is this unique? Why is it going to make the buyer look smart? Why is it going to make the retailer look like they've just hit a home run? And then, you know, what is the proof, right? So when we talk about, you know, data, sometimes even the best data is like, what do you see on the internet? So when you see Facebook and there are people raving about this product, those are things to point out, because your buyer is going to be wanting some proof that what you're presenting is social proof that people will want this product.
And this is all brilliant. This is essentially the 101 of what you need to do at the beginning of those buyer meetings. I want to let everybody know in the audience, we've actually created an additional piece of content that will come after this webinar. That's a checklist that you can really easily use to tick off boxes to make sure that you've covered all these points when you prepare for your next buyer meeting. To get access to that, we're going to send a feedback form out after the webinar. I encourage everybody to fill it out purely out of the fact to make our webinars better. I'm sure there's many areas that we can improve on, and I'd love to hear some feedback. But also you get access to this additional checklist, which myself and Phil have put together. So that's a really great benefit too. We're going to jump into our next poll. We want to see out in the audience whether you guys have felt pressure to show more data during buyer meetings. So I'll just get that poll up, and that's jumping up now. Phil, I want to ask you, what do you think the current sentiment is at the moment?
I think that I think we have a lot of data. Like I think if you cover the method, the fields that we've presented, you'll do just fine. I think where the pressure, it'll come out like you need more data. What I would look at first is how effectively you're telling the story with the data before you add more data. You know, because these ticks all the boxes that a buyer needs. And so sometimes it's just about like, if you don't finesse it, if you kind of chuck it out there, then the buyer will respond in different ways. So you want to be able to manage the narrative really well and tell that story. And then that pressure should go away, I think.
So essentially you're saying it's quality over quantity.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think the responses that we're getting from the poll here is that the vast majority are saying that they are feeling more pressure to show data during buyer meetings, which is, look, we're going to be talking about magic next, and how you kind of take that next step. But I think the days of anecdotes and relationships are kind of over.
Yes.
Now it's being able to justify yourself effectively and being able to do it confidently and backed by data. So yeah, I'm going to close that poll off there, and we'll keep going on with the fun part now. Phil, I'll let you take away the magic.
Magic is really fun. So magic is where you really take what you did, the groundwork that you laid in method. You're going to be able to capitalize on magic. Before you do that, what you want to do is make sure you're on the same page. So sales teams typically, you know, your mindset going into this meeting, so we talked a little bit about this, is, you know, if you have a monthly meeting, you probably spend a good chunk of that month thinking about the meeting, how you're going to do this. You're executing on a plan that you set up at the beginning of the year. You are looking forward to next month's program. You're trying to finish, which everyone hates, the paperwork from last month's program. And then you're analyzing last week's performance or last month's performance. And then you're probably getting a lot of pressure from the buyer for next week's paperwork. On the other side, what you need to do to get yourself in the mindset of magic is Buyers are not thinking about any of this stuff.
Yeah.
They are mad about yesterday, right? So if they're out of stocks, like, so if you get a call on Monday morning or Monday afternoon, you probably did something wrong, or something went wrong in the market last week.
Yeah.
So I used to hate those calls, right? Like, those are the worst calls. And so, they're probably mad about yesterday, but they are reacting to tomorrow. So they've just gotten, if you're a buyer at a bigger chain, and you've probably gotten about 300 emails, probably one from every store or one from every regional manager going, this is wrong, or I've got issues with scans. I've got, they're worried about all that stuff.
Yep.
They're trying to execute next month because they're trying to either readjust for the profit that they didn't make this month, or they're trying to, compensate for next month. But they're also building 6 months out. So we're in April. So right now they're putting to bed Halloween. So they're thinking about Halloween programs right now. And then they are making a bet on December. So they're trying to figure out like what the right Christmas ornaments are. What's the trend? Is it gold or silver or themes and all those sort of things, right? So when you get them for Magic, you've got to be thinking the way they're thinking. They're thinking future and not, in the past.
Definitely.
Okay. So Magic isn't really magic. It's tangible, right? So a really common way to do this is to bring like this 360 kind of great big marketing program of like, hey, we're going to do all these things. What you want to do is take that 360 strategy and really dial it into something that matters for the buyer.
Yeah.
So you want to take tangible insight and you want to add an actionable program so the buyer goes, oh, I get it. This is how it's relevant to me.
Yeah.
If you bring a, hey, we're going to put like $1 million into social media, it means nothing to the buyer.
Yeah.
There's nothing for them. So what you want to do is you want to bring an insight that teaches your buyer something new about the category, that helps the buyer trust that you've got unbiased category insights, and then will help you to inspire that buyer to be able to do new things and ask you for more trends and insights. That in turn turns you into someone who can be reliable for them, who can be proactive for them. That's going to really turn into something magical.
And Phil, I love this magic part because I feel like this is the most practical stuff that we've seen out in the field. We've kind of seen brands take tangible insights and put them into actionable programs. And it makes me want to speak to a specific example that we've seen. Now, I've changed the name of the brands, although this has actually happened with a few different brands that we've spoken with and dealt with and have as current clients as well in the past in Askuity. But basically the scenario I'm going to set is we're going to use a brand called Chris's Cleaning Products.
Okay.
We currently sell through Target. So if you do see us out there, buy us.
Buy it. Buy lots of it. Chris is taking orders at the end of this.
I wish. But what we have, Chris's Cleaning Products has two main product lines. So they have their eco-friendly cleaners and their general cleaners. And with those there, the assortment was generally split 50-50 amongst all stores in the US at Target. They had a NAM at Chris's Cleaning Products who recognized that the environmental record of a particular state was correlated with the units sold either for the eco-friendly or for the general cleaning product. The states with a greater or a better environmental record would purchase more eco-friendly. The states with a poor environmental record would purchase more of the general cleaner. Now, this NAM had a hunch. What the accounts team did is they actually pulled up the data and had a look and saw whether the hunch was backed by data. Little to their surprise, and you can see this in the graph that I'm just showing here, in a really, really strong performing environmental states such as California, you can see the eco-friendly glass cleaner far outperforming the general glass cleaner. And on the converse, in a state such as Ohio, where the record for the environment is poorer, the general glass cleaner is outperforming the eco-friendly glass cleaner. Now, this is all fantastic internally, and I'll jump back to the 360 strategy. This is really important to educate and try and educate strategy for a brand. But the magic really comes in, as we spoke about before, when you're bringing this kind of insight to a buyer meeting. Now, what Chris's Cleaning Products did and what the team did at Chris's Cleaning Products is they brought this case to their buyer, made a case for changing the assortment for the next shipping season based on environmental record. Now, the big thing that we always hear is the buyer is absolutely ecstatic, right? They're really excited by the initiative, and that's something that we spoke about on 2 slides back. Really excited about the proactive nature of the brand, and as a result, implemented changes for the next shipping season. Now, this is a simple example, right, Phil? This is something that if you look at something as regionality, it can go into far greater complexity. But this is something that's really simple, using the data, which is really easily pulled, having a look at it, bringing that tangible insight back to their buyer, and making a real impact with their buyer at target.
Yeah. So like, and before you flip, I think like, you know, for Chris's products, you've just got more efficiency out of your SKUs. You've gotten better performance that you can go back to the buyer. On the buyer side, the things that you don't see is like, one, I've got happier stores, right? So the stores in California aren't going to be emailing me going, you know, I've got these 3 facings of general cleaner that aren't doing anything for me. What do I do with them, right? So to me, a buyer, the first mechanism would be, hey, I'll discount them.
Yeah.
But I'm losing profit off them, right?
For sure.
And then my efficiency per slot isn't working. None of those things are working. So now I've got more efficiency. I have less stores calling me. And then what I've just gotten from you is you just got my stores excited because the stores in California now feel like, hey, you know, you get us. You're this national, you know, buyer, but you get me as a region. How do I do more, right? And then in Ohio, it's similar. It's the flip side of the story. Is like, God, get that green, you know, get these stuff out of my store, get me the general cleaner. But now I can do more with it, right?
Definitely.
So now I've got like these really great mechanics that impact my open to buy, that allow me to do things. And then you've cut like 1 million emails out of my inbox, which makes me happier.
Less emails is always better, right?
Yeah. Stop the emails, right?
So we're going to jump into our last poll here. And we want to switch it over to metrics and see which metrics are most important for those out in the audience when they're dealing with their buyer meetings. I'm going to send that poll up now, but while people go through and answer it, Phil, what metrics do you feel are the most important and why?
So it depends. At the beginning of the year or when I'm planning, margin is the big thing. And what I would say to sales teams is, if you're not doing it, ask the buyer what their margin expectations are for the category. So it's really critical to get that. One, because then you know where you stand. So if I'm trying to grow a category 10% and you show up with a 5% growth rate, guess what I'm doing to you? I'm going to cut your space. I'm going to get really irritable with you, or your monthly meeting is going to go to a quarterly or half-year meeting. And so similarly, if you can show up with 20% growth and I want to grow 10, guess what I'm doing? I want to meet with you more often because I want to know how I can get more out of you, right? So that's if I'm planning the year or I'm planning the half year. If you're getting a call on Monday morning, it's probably because of out of stocks. So that's when I'm going to call and kind of tear a strip into you because I lost sales because of that. And then in the afternoon, when I've finished yelling at all the people who shorted my stores, I'm calling you in the afternoon to find out why you shipped me so many products that I've got stock kicking around everywhere, and what are you going to do about it? So
can I assure everybody out in the audience, Phil is a tremendously nice guy. He does sound like an extremely angry buyer, and I'm not too sure what the experience is out in the audience, but he's a very nice guy. So
if you've had me as a buyer, don't answer that.
So just to quickly let the audience know, with the poll, margin is what we're seeing the greatest response for. Over 80% of people have selected that as their most important. But you know, the whole gamut there is everybody kind of touches on sales units, sales dollars, inventory turns. So it's all important. So we're going to jump into the most exciting section, I think, and this is the madness. Phil, take it away.
Madness is the best. Okay, so you can't get here unless you've done method and magic. Madness doesn't work otherwise because it's really aspirational. It's about, you know, we talked about the buyer in like 6 months and 9 months out. Madness is where you really inspire them to do that. And it's really about, you know, one, keeping track of the things that you're doing in magic that the buyer gets excited about. So that isn't necessarily, that cleaners in California works really well, or that they're really excited about, you know, their open to buy being better or their turns being better. What it is, you know, if we stay with the cleaner example, is this is a chance for you to say, okay, so I got him excited because I was able to cook up, you know, I was able to get him efficiencies and win him California. So now how do I do that with all of the other states? Like, is there something I can do there? Or could I make eco-friendly in California so big for this buyer that, you know, now it becomes something that the buyer can really trumpet in the organization. You know, it really like smokes his profit numbers, like all those sorts of things. And so these are long tail plays. You want to get them inspired in the 9-month range, the year range, so that the buyer always comes back to you. So if I'm a buyer and I'm excited, and then let's say Chris's products has shown me how to do that in California, Ohio, Texas, and probably cleaning products like Florida, let's say, right, are the top 4 states. I'm going to be picking up the phone to call Chris's products every time. So, hey, Chris, I've got a problem in Arkansas. What do I do? What do you recommend? And then similarly, Chris's products should be calling me going, hey, listen, I've got an idea that's longer tail, right? Like I'm launching some new products next year that are eco-friendly that I'd like your take on. They're 90% baked, but I'd like your input on it. And me as a buyer, because I trust Chris's products now, I will spend the hour or 2 with a buyer, with the team to go, all right, I love this product. I don't love this one. I could sell it at this price point. Oh my God, this is so great. When can you get it to me? Those sort of things that really get a buyer excited that I like. Chris should move up to first on my speed dial. And I do have vendors that have done this. A lot of people think that that's like a top 1-2, like a Procter & Gamble, a Johnson & Johnson, one of these guys. It's not. It's some of those guys are really good at it, but there are a lot of retailers or a lot of vendors that just figure this out, and when they do it right, it really goes really well. Yeah,
that's brilliant. So that brings us to the conclusion of all the content that we're presenting on our side. Firstly, I'd like to thank you, Phil, for coming in. This has been a really great webinar, and we've loved the opportunity to be able to pick your brain as a former buyer. You can see all our contact information here. If you want to reach out to Phil, his email is there. Also, ourselves at Askuity, you can touch base with us. There's a couple more things I want to touch on very quickly, and then we're going to open the floor up to some questions. The first thing is this recording and the slides as well, I will be sending out later this afternoon, so keep an eye on your inboxes. The second thing is the feedback form. Again, I'm going to be sending that out at the conclusion of this webinar. I'd really encourage everybody to get onto it and provide us feedback, because our webinars continue to get better and better out of your feedback out in the audience. As well as that, you get access to that method, how to prepare for your next buyer meeting checklist, which is a really valuable piece of content. So we've come to the conclusion. I'm going to open up the floors to some questions. What we're going to do, you can actually get access to the question poll through the terminal, through the Zoom info terminal, and pop them in there. And if you've got anything for myself or anything for Phil that you want to pick his mind as a former target buyer to ask him about, feel free to put them in there.
We can take orders for Chris's cleaning products.
That too. I'm happy to get that started. I think I should quit Askuity and start Chris's cleaning products. Sounds like I've got a customer in Phil. So
got it. You got it.
So we've got one question come through, and this is from Tom. Tom asks, how would you evaluate the success of a madness tactic?
Yeah, so madness is going to be, so I think the one thing is you do get the trust of the buyer. So madness, when you go, so the thing about madness is it is an ideation process, right? So not everything you propose is going to happen, and not everything is going to happen to the scale that you want it. So you're going to dream ideas, and sometimes it might go from being like, I want to build a whole new cleaning lineup for Chris's products, and it might only turn into, hey, you know what? I just need a different flavor window cleaner, or it might turn into like, hey, you know what? We're gonna have National Window Cleaning Day, and Chris's products are gonna be the only ones featured on that day. So they could translate totally differently, but I think that's when you have to go, right, so madness gets a check mark because it turned me into a new tactic that I didn't have before.
And then you would go forward and evaluate the tactic in the generic sense, just go through that same cycling method and magic. And that would kind of be the way to go. So we've got a couple of questions here. I might jump down to this one from Anthony. So what sort of objective data from stores will make a buyer's life easier? Are there in-aisle insights that would help them in their day-to-day jobs?
Let's see here. So objective data from stores. Some of that is going to be, so think of, what I'm thinking about is like store research. So you think of like planograms and layouts, and planograms are like this really specific exercise of like, what goes on the middle, bullseye of the shelf that gets shopped the most, and then what gets pushed up into the corners that are less turning SKUs, that are not, that are not as critical. And so I think what you can bring from stores is like that data is really helpful. So if you're in a store and you can observe consumer behavior that says, you know what, like these products don't turn and they're on the bullseye shelf, or they do turn, but they're on the bottom shelf, are things that you'll want to answer that a buyer may or may not think about. So that could be, trying to think of like, there's this one that's kind of weird. There's one that's around back pain. So back pain products used to get shelved on the bottom because of the way they turn. So they're really slow turning SKUs. They're very profitable, but they get put on the bottom. But the insight is, if you have back pain, you can't bend down to pick it up, right?
Yeah,
But it actually took, like, if you think of like head offices and the way you structure data, that might never come out. But it took a key account manager who was in store going, these people can't pick it up. Like, bend down to, like, store staff is always in that section picking it up for them.
Yeah.
And then they found a store that just went, you know what, screw head office. I'm going to move it up to the middle, and their sales picked up by 30% because people with back pain can actually reach the product. So things like that will help a buyer, because they can't get into all 1,000 stores or 300 stores to see that stuff. So they rely on that kind of feedback to be able to get that stuff in.
Brilliant. So Scott's got a really good question here. And Scott asks, what metrics do buyers typically get measured on that impacts their compensation plans and bonuses? Before you answer that, I'm going to tell Scott, download 10 things your buyer hates about you. And I like the fact that he's trying to get in the minds of his buyers. That's really, really good. But Phil, I'll let you take the floor.
Okay, so if you're strictly talking about a buyer's bonus and how they're goaled, the first thing is going to be profit, because that is the number that they're after all the time. The one behind that is going to be volume. And so if you think of your products, bucket it either as your profit item or your volume item. So you either sell a ton of stuff that makes them money, or you sell one thing and makes them a lot of money. So those two things are key to the way a buyer gets bonus. And then after that is efficiency. So things like, how many SKUs do you have on shelf? How much warehouse space do you take? How efficient are you with your open to buy budget? Those are the next things after that.
Brilliant. Here's another really great question from Eric. Outside of set face-to-face meetings, when does a buyer want to hear from you, and what do they want to hear and know?
Okay, yeah. So here's where I would get, if you don't keep a list of questions that you need to ask your buyer, I would, during your year, I would write down every question that you ever had for a buyer. And so because some of you answered monthly, you only get with a monthly, you only get like one crack at, asking all your questions. So I would get a ton of behavioral things out of your buyer, or routine things. So my people always knew that I do promo planning in the middle of the week. So like by Wednesday afternoon, like, so Monday, it varies from retailer to retailer, but like on a Monday morning, I'm running reports. I want to know who is yelling at me and who's unhappy with me. And then I need to know who I need to get unhappy with. So that's Monday morning. Monday afternoon, I'm trying to fix things that are inherently broken with things that I'm going to get bonused on. By Tuesday, I'm now clear of those things, and I'm trying to solve operational issues. So the store is complaining, things aren't scanning, flyers aren't working, whatever those sort of things are. By Wednesday, I'm hyper focused on, do I have next week's promo set? Do I have next month's promo set? So by Wednesday afternoon, I want to hear from you guys. So that would be my schedule. What you want to do is get a sense from your buyers, when are they planning? So when are they thinking about those things, so that you can start writing those things down, and so you mirror their schedule. So by Wednesday morning, you kind of like, by Wednesday noon, you've sent you would have sent me, hey, here are my promos for next week. Here are all the paperwork that you need. Here are all the images you need. Everything's in a complete package. The other thing you want to do is like, who is on that buyer's team that you can interface with that takes work off the buyer's plate. So if you have a buyer's assistant or you have an analyst, figure out what's important to them, because maybe you can get to them and get work done ahead of time so that you can get all of that stuff out of the way. The last thing is, like, when are your planograms due? So if, let's say, my planograms drop in June and they drop again in January, you want to get to that buyer 2 months ahead of time, right? Because they're going to be doing all the work around like historical numbers. What did that planogram do? How do I get more efficient? What my growth numbers are? That's when you want to get to them to go, hey, I have a new product I need to present to you, or there's a reason why my numbers have dipped. I've got a plan for fixing it. Don't cut my facings. Don't take out product. Here's how I get there.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
So just conscious out of time, I know that we've gone, I think we're already 15 minutes over. In fact, we're 7 minutes over. What I might do is I might cut it short here.
Okay.
If anybody else has got any other questions, we'll take a look at them afterwards and we'll do our best to reach out to you.
I can answer. Yeah. I can email you back answers or whatever.
Perfect.
Yeah, happy to do it.
That'd look brilliant. So if you've got any more questions, just pop your email on there as well. We should have it anyway, but pop it on there and we can get across to you and go from there. But yeah, Phil, I'd like to thank you one more time and thank you for everybody coming on the call today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, thanks guys for joining us. This was really great.
Perfect. Thank you.